and I wanted to serve God. But my anxiousness was misplaced. At that point, I didn't see it. In any case, I decided to go ahead and join this group. And let's see, there was so much that happened. I don't want to miss out some of the other points here. But I ended up going back. And I remember how that as I was going there, they told me to go back to Minnesota for about a year, that they were having trouble with the media. In that later I found out that they didn't have any guns handy, but that the government was looking to make them the first Waco. And it turned out that they didn't have any guns with them, so they turned aside from them and went, of course, after the Koresh. Koresh is in Waco. In any case, I was in Minnesota working this job for about a year, and I continued to pass out their newspapers and their tracts they had sent me, and I was going all over Minneapolis and all over St. Paul and handing the stuff out to people. And then I had a desire to go back, and she called me one day, and it was near several years from Y2K yet. This might have been in 96 or perhaps 97. And I remember how that I told my brother David about this place in the desert in New Mexico, and he ended up going with me, and I told him all the good things that I had seen, but I didn't at that point feel like I had a lot of great discernment as far as who they were all about and what they were all about. My brother David went along with me, and we went in separate cars, but we went together, and we went there, and my brother David immediately felt there was something wrong with that place. He wanted to get up, in fact, in the middle of the night and leave. But I talked him out of it, and then he ended up getting into a confrontation with Jim and Deborah Green, and he said that, well, this is communism. This is all this that you're doing here. It's nothing short of communism. And all that he was seeing in them, and all the little inconsistencies that he was picking up with the group and their whole format, and how that they were living, and this and that. And at the time, I wasn't convinced that they were not of God, and I may have even convinced myself that they were of God. But my brother David ended up, after about a month there, he ended up leaving. He went back, and he left behind his bike with me, and I ended up giving my car back to the bank because I had no way of continuing making payments to it, and I ended up giving my car away. At that point, I remember how that I began to have some small skirmishes with Jim and Deborah Green, and that they would confront me with things. And I was at that point a little overweight. I remember how that I was sitting there, and Jim told me, well, you know, you're a little overweight, aren't you? And I go, well, yeah, a little bit, I guess. I kind of let myself go. And the way he put it, and the way he was saying it, really just did something to me. I ended up going for a walk along this path. They've got this huge field in the back of their complex, I guess you could call it, and these dirt roads and these embankments with dirt, and I remember how that as I was walking and asking the Lord, what's going on with this, and what am I doing here, and how that all of a sudden out of the blue comes a white owl, and it flew around me like this and landed on the embankment, and it started screeching at me and lifting its wings up, and I couldn't understand what was going on with that. I know that I had later found out that this General Deborah Green had come out of an Indian witchcraft background, and I couldn't help. At that point, I didn't really think much of it, but it crossed my mind as I was watching that owl. And then the owl, I sat there and stared at that owl for a few minutes, and finally the owl took off. And then I remember how that I remember going to General Deborah one day, and I says, I began to feel that maybe I should leave. And so I said, I just wanted to thank you for all the things that I've learned here, and I appreciated that you would put me up for a while, and that's not why I came here, I said, but I feel like I've learned what I needed to learn, and I feel like maybe it's time to move on. And at that point, I felt a real evil presence enter that room. And what had happened next was she started to accuse me of not doing anything for them, and not buying them or not giving them anything. And I says, I says, I've given you my last $100 bill here. I said, I've bought you groceries, I've bought you this, I've given my time and effort and working here, and I've given everything that I've had to come here. And I said, so what you're telling me is just simply not true. And so she began to again accuse me of things. And then that night, I remember how that she, because we would have these prayer sessions twice a day. Once in the morning, about 5 o'clock in the morning, and then towards the evening, might have been perhaps 5, 6 in the evening. And how that she began to prophesy that those who cannot keep a vow would be punished, and that those who could not keep a promise or a vow, and that the Lord would cause that person to wander all the days of their life, and then when they die, they would go to hell. So I took that as a direct warning to me, as I felt that she was directing that to me. And at that point, the next morning, I woke up, and it was kind of a windy morning, kind of rainy. And then we ended up going to prayer session again, and she repeated that prophecy, that warning. And I began to wonder and second guess myself, and ask myself questions as to whether or not what I was doing, did I make the right choice, and am I hearing from God? Am I doing what's right? I mean, I was confused, and I was scared. And at that point, I remember how that I prayed, and then she said, then I said, well, is it possible I could talk to you? Then she slammed the door in my face. And then, so I went back and I prayed, and I was shaking in my boots because I had no idea what was going on here. I was thinking I was going to be punished. I had no hope left at all. And how that the Lord prompted me to get up again and knock on the door. So I knocked on the door, and she opened the door, and I says, is it possible I could have heard wrong from the Lord? And she said yes. And so I said, what can I do to make things right? I says, if the Lord wants me here, then I said, I'll be happy to stay here. But at that point I was confused, and my brother had left already. He was long gone, and I mourned that greatly, in that now I had no one there that I knew, really. I was trying to become friends with the people that were there and what have you, but it was sort of a surfacey thing, and then she says, go back into that room and pray to God, and we'll come and get you when it's time. And so I remember going back and sorting out all the things that I knew that I probably would never need anymore, because if I was doomed to go to hell, then I had no need for most of anything that I had anymore. And I remember how I sat there hopeless, completely hopeless, and how that I began to put just a few items in my bag and ready to walk out, and then I remember I should probably stay and pray too before I go, just in case. And so I got on my knees and I cried out to God. And then I remember how that I had one of those people came in and said, Tim, the generals want to see you now. So I got up and I went in to see him, and all at once the clouds grew dark outside, and you could hear the rolling thunder and the wind and all of that coming. It was like it was coming over this complex, and it was pretty scary because I'd never heard the wind howl quite like that. And I remember how that I had to stay. I went into this kitchen where it was a large kitchen / cafeteria, and they had these large metal tables and their kitchen area, and over here was a rocking chair, and General Jim was in his military clothing, walking back and forth with his arms behind his back, not looking at me as the wind was howling outside, and I was standing at attention just like I was in the military. And how that he was looking back and forth at this magazine on the table, kind of shuffling through it. And then in walks General Deborah Green, and she takes a seat in the rocking chair, and she says, so, what do you have to say for yourself? And I sat there, and I didn't know what to say. I just remember how that I asked the Lord to help me, and that I began to speak, and I began to tell them that, I wanted an opportunity to repent, to get things right. If I was wrong, I wanted to make things right. Well, she began at that point to go on a torrid 1 hour lashing of how evil I was and my brother was, that he would come here and accuse us of taking a vacation from Minnesota to avoid the winter, and it was completely false. But she she began to just tear me apart for about an hour long. I sat there.